Yeah, we have an opportunity right now to cripple their emergent economy, a future known enemy of the United States. Of course, we're going to do that. Of
Right.
course we are.
Yeah.
And if you need to leverage the entire world stage with economic, doom and gloom, if they don't come to the table to assist you with that, that's exactly what you're supposed to do. That's exactly what we need you to do, and that's exactly what he's doing. So he gets a lot of right? Because people are like, well, I don't want to pay more for my, $15, strap pack or whatever that I go hiking in that was made in China by, third world sweatshop kids. Now it's going to go up to $17, right? And it's like, well, the thing is, you don't even know what the cost benefit analysis ultimately these policies will be. Could be that Chinese factories have to necessarily lower their price. You might get those goods for cheaper in order for them to compete against the tariff. You don't know.
Either way, a deal will be made, right? I mean, either
Of
way,
course.
it sounds like something. There's a symbiotic relationship here. Something can be worked out, and that's what it feels like. There's been a lot of intellectual property theft from the United States by China, with no consequences. There's a lot of that stuff. So I'm hoping.
Well, and they said, what did they say on Joe Rogan's podcast? I don't remember who the guest was. He made a great point. I looked into it. He was right. He said, look, if you go to a world court, okay, and the Chinese do, and they want to sue a U.S. company, that's a U.S. company showing up for the suit. Okay,
Yeah.
they're going to show up. They're going to have to defend themselves. It's going to go through the court system. They have standing. It's going to happen. You can't sue a Chinese company from America.
No.
They don't give a shit and they don't enforce it.
I've got
How in
friends
the world?
who went through that. Yeah.
Yeah, how's that playing by the rules, man?
Right.
How is that coming to the table for, for us to be able to even get back intellectual property from our inventors? Those are our countrymen, our blood, who invent these wonderful world-changing products. And some little over in China just rips it off, right? And just dismisses the entire reciprocity of being able to go after them for redress
Yeah.
for stealing this from
Yeah.
you. And oftentimes, here's why that's so dangerous too. It's not just the idea, oh, well, they stole the property and they're making it for cheaper. It's that you can actually take a product that could be world changing, make it so poorly that you destroy its reputation forever,
That's right.
forever.
Well, but
And
by the other thing is the number of Chinese nationals in AI labs who are de facto spies for the CCP because they don't have a choice. When the CCP comes to you and says, hey, you're doing this for us, you're not saying no. You can't say no. So, and I've had a couple of people who were whistleblowers in the whole AI thing and worked at OpenAI for a while. And it's so competitive among different American companies that they're hiring whoever's the best. And a lot of them are Chinese nationals. But it's not surprising that DeepSeek and these things have disrupted our whole AI industry because, and now you can say open source is good and whatever. I don't get into that. I do think, though, that was probably a result of the fact that they had access to our labs and had access to our technology and took it. So,
Well, and let me make another really rudimentary argument that I also found to be very convincing, even though it's so rudimentary. You and I would agree that power and the dollar are intertwined, that generally, if you're a wealthy person, you tend to have a lot more power than a person who's not wealthy.
yes.
Especially if you're in an industry that controls some type of product that people want, that's going to necessarily accumulate power. Well, if I have to pick between American moguls who are, in some way, they have to answer to the American people and have to answer to our court system, I definitely want them to have the power over any Chinese national who like, if I have to pick between American Bill Gates or, Chin Wu Zi, I'm picking Bill Gates, right? Because
please don't mock Chinese names by saying Chin Wu Zi. There's nobody named Chin Wu Zi out there.
Okay,
For God's sake. For God's sake, Andrew.
Yeah, but what am I thinking?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that they would be like,
no, you're 100%. That's a great point, though. That's a great point. That's it. That's
I mean, at
true.
least if I have to choose, in other words, the great evils here for like who's got to have to control all of this, versus who isn't. It's like if power necessarily is going to create influence and is going to create power over certain infrastructures and certain technologies and this and that, I still want it local. Okay?
Yeah,
I still want it to be my king. Right?
Let's go back to your Christian nationalism, because your nationalism would mean America first, right? somewhat protectionist, or you still believe in the world market and the open market?
Protectionist as far as any necessity towards putting America first.
So,
So
so
if
our
protectionism is
computer,
necessary
yeah.
for us to get the best deal for our people, if protectionism is necessary for us to control our own borders, if protectionism is a necessary precondition for doing these things, then protectionism. If getting into global markets for some reason, perhaps to keep the American dollar very strong or something like that, is necessary for the security of the American people, then I'm fine with opening up a bit for global markets and trade and things like that as
Sure.
well.
So whatever works, whatever's best for the prosperity of the American people.
But
Right.
yes, the
Right.
prosperity of the American people always needs to be the center point. So all other, with the way that I view it, through the prism of what America First is supposed to be, that all other social ideologies and political ideologies always start with this question: is this good for us before it's good for anybody else? Right? It's not good enough that it's equal. It's not even good enough that we have a deal where it's good for you and good for us. We need to always come out on top.
See,
It
I
needs to
go
always be
further
our
than that.
people first.
I go further than that, Andrew. I say to myself, I think the founding fathers solved the political problem, and I think of the people, for the people, and by the people is and the great checks and balances, the bicameral legislature, the fact that we have an executive, that we have a judicial branch, that we have, the legislative branch. These are, and by the way, the fourth estate, who speaks truth to power. These are all great checks and balances. These all are there so that power does not sit or reside or can't be factioned into one particular group. So in a lot of ways, what I love about the American experiment is that it allows human beings, regardless of who you are and where you are, it allows Americans, and they can be of Chinese descent, they can be of Ashkenazi descent, they can be of Swedish descent. It allows Americans, people, to realize their potential. There's no other system that allows someone to be what they can be, what they can imagine themselves to be. And most of the world has to deal, they have to forego who they could be for who they have to be. And that's directly related probably to a lot of factors, but mainly that they got it wrong back when, and they're holding on to something like a monarchy, an oligarchy, or whatever it is. So in my opinion, if you look at the Constitution, it is, and even the separation of church and state, regardless of how religious you are, it is the great document. It is the greatest idea in political philosophy, far and away. And it is because it dovetails so well with the best human nature has to offer.
But there's a precondition for it to work, which was stated by the founders.
Virtue.
The precondition is that it has to be for a moral population, or it can't work.
Yep.
We no longer have a moral population, and you see all Western nations which have piggybacked off of constitutional ideas, including Mexico, who drafts a constitution directly off of ours. Many European nations also borrowed from it. Even 150 years ago, they were still borrowing from it. The problem is you don't have a moral population. If you have no moral population, what's going to happen necessarily is that we're going to shift in faction into groups, and it's exactly what we've done.
Do you not think we have a moral population? I think we are. I think Americans are filling churches back up and everything else. I think that we are. They're leaving
the Protestant churches in droves. They are moving a little bit more towards traditional churches, but look.
Right.
Just 60, 70 years ago, it was 90% plus who identified as Christian and at least went to church occasionally. But whether or not they were going to church, they were still at least adopting Christian ethics as being the standard of universal for which all people needed to abide their lives, at least to some degree.
Define those Christian ethics for us.
Well, Christian ethics is going to be broadly based around the idea of the covenant laws, including the 10 commandments, the laws that Jesus Christ put down, and the general teachings of Jesus Christ into a single ethical system. The ethical system itself is going to be in a relationship to how human beings both treat each other and how they do a process of law when it comes to an ethical purview.
So everybody's have the same moral worth, due process.
Well, inherently, yes. things like slavery would be, and this is why Christians were so adamant against slavery, right? And why
Right.
they were the first to the table
They were.
for abolition, especially in Europe.
People
And
forget that.
here in the
Yeah.
United States, even the deists, many of them were opposed to the institution of slavery. They hated it. They thought that it was a kind of black eye. But that's the way the world worked. And a lot of these guys were, you're at the mercy in some ways to how the traditions of the world have operated. Up until that point, up until abolition, the whole world operated on slavery for thousands of years. And there wasn't,
Right.
there, I mean, that was just the MO of everything. But what Christian ethics provides is it provides universal basic ethics, universalized in a way that you can justify. So you can base the reasonings behind the things that you ought to do along the lines of what the divine commands from Almighty God Himself were. And so now you have both justification and an accounting, right? And when this is applied, we get to see something else that's really great, the effects. And the effects of a Christian and moral populace are fantastic. The effects of a secular populace are communism, they're socialism, they're secular humanism. There are all of these other isms which lead towards great decadence in society and towards
But
the
also
destruction
creativity.
of families.
Also creativity. Yeah.
Yeah.
In other words,
well, yeah, I would argue that creativity, when you think of things like beauty and creativity and things like this, the inspirations for those things almost always come from love of family, and from
or the
the
divine of
ideas.
some kind, right? The
Yeah,
idea
sure.
that I'm,
But that's part of the family structure too. Like with absent family, right?
Mm.
Absent the idea of brothers, sisters, moms, dads, kids, cousins, things like that. Absent that, purpose gets driven out. Like
I couldn't agree more. I mean,
gone.
I think the absence of fathers has been one of the most destructive things maybe the most destructive thing in this society.